Hello, I'm Ashley Hicks. I'm a designer and a maker of furniture and objects, bits of art, painted rooms, all kinds of things. One of the things I like doing most is photographing historic interiors. And so I've just photographed Burley, great house in England, for a new book. And I'm about to start on the Soane Museum in London for a book on that. And I love taking photographs of historic interiors, but I particularly love it because I love being in them. I'm absolutely fascinated by them. So I thought I'd put together a series of little tours of historic interiors, exteriors, gardens, all sorts of things. And I'm going to be using historic photographs, not my own, and then a lot of my own pictures, mainly my own pictures. But in some cases, there'll be things like here, a photograph from the 1920s of Kedleston House up in Derbyshire. It's a tremendous building. And then some historic bits like this wonderful portrait of the mother and son who built the house, the son, Nathaniel Curzon. And I presume that's his baby brother who must have died before him. And so he's shown as an angel up in the top left. And then drawings of the house here from Robert Adams' office. Wonderful cross-section through the great hall there. And then here's a tiny detail, which is a sugar caster, again drawn by Robert Adam or his office. So he really designed every single detail for that house. And here's some of my pictures of the interior, the great columns of local alabaster and wonderful little details. And I love focusing on small details like these Roman-inspired stools in the hall, again by Adam. And then some historic pictures like this group of young people after a hunt ball, having sort of, I suppose, the breakfast after the hunt ball in that same hall. And then what about this? This is Slim Aarons photographing the Duke and Duchess of Marlborough, having a little sort of, sitting out reading a paper, doing a bit of embroidery with their little home behind them, Blenheim Palace, biggest house in England. Now, I mean, it's not, but it is vast. Look at it. But it's such a hilarious picture, I think. I love that. And here, the interior of Blenheim, one of my own rather terrible pictures, and the wonderful soaring saloon, I think it's called. And is that painted by Louis Laguerre? Maybe. Anyway, I am calling this series The Unreliable Guide because I'm not an expert on any of these things. And so I'll try to read up before each one. But we may find that I'm, lacking in precision occasionally. Here's another. Blenheim is built by Sir John Vanbrugh, the architect, and who also worked at Stowe here. And Stowe is the great palace of the Dukes of Buckingham, which then turned into a school, which I was at when I was a teenager. I was sort of, in there. And then I went back with a drone a few years ago and took this aerial view, and you can see the tremendous avenue stretching off into the distance, the vast garden. And then inside, this is the ceiling painted by William Kent in the North Hall. And downstairs, the Gothic Library, which is the only interior in the house done by Sir John Soane. And this was the headmaster's study, still is, I think, the headmaster's study. And I was interviewed in that headmaster's study for my scholarship exam in 1976. You see, it says, interview with headmaster in Gothic Library. It's an absolutely terrifying thing. Mr. Drayson, the headmaster, took one look at me and said, well, you seem to me a dilettante. Do you know what that means? I said, no, sir, I don't, sir. What is it, sir? He said, well, it's like a butterfly flitting from flower to flower, which honestly is probably quite a good description of it. But when I went back to look at the house more recently, of course, the Gothic Library was locked because the school was on holiday. And so I could just see the windows that give a bit of borrowed daylight from the passage outside. And typical Sir John Soane, he's put in some bits of sort of amber-coloured glass to give a bit of Roman light. He loved to do that. So the only photograph I could get of the room was through the amber-coloured glass, which looks quite fun. And here in the garden at Stowe, the Palladian Bridge, We used to hang out and smoke cigarettes very naughtily and drink alcohol. And here the Gothic temple, which is a fantastic, very eccentric building. And inside it, the wonderful, wonderful sunset light. And then the gilded dome inside there with this mad sort of heraldic armorial ceiling with all of the coats of arms of all of the relations of, I think, Lord Cobham, who built that. Anyway, here's another mad garden building, which is the triangular lodge, the Warrener's cottage originally. It was for a rabbit keeper, belonging to a man called Sir Thomas Tresham, who was a mad keen Catholic in a time when it was illegal to be a Catholic in England. And so he was obsessed with the idea of the Trinity, and so wanted triangles on everything, and Trinity and Tresham, his name, you see. So he built a triangular lodge with triangular windows, triangular everything. There he is in his armour, looking rather fantastic. And here he is picturing, and this is from a book that he published, I think, and this is showing him imprisoned, writing about religious matters, and he's got symbols of the Passion around him. It's a rather wonderful image. And here's one of the triangular windows in his triangular lodge. Here's another mad building, the little castle at Bolsover in Derbyshire. And this is built by a fantastic character called William Cavendish, the Duke of Newcastle, who built it to entertain the king, and then he had to go into exile. And while in exile, he published this fantastic book showing off how good a horseman he was, and he thought he was the best horseman in the world, I think. And he had taught King Charles II to ride, and here's a picture of him riding his horse outside Bolsover. And then here another marvellous illustration in the book where he's being sort of bowed down to by all the horses of the world as the king of the horses. It's a very, very funny story. And then here we're at Biddulph Grange in Staffordshire. This is a fantastic garden, all organised around some sort of strange sort of religious principle, which is a rather fascinating story, and we'll look at that. But here's the Egyptian garden at Biddulph Grange, and here instead is the Chinese garden, and it belongs to the National Trust now, and they've restored it rather beautifully. Then we might go to Italy. Why not? I mean, we've got to go to Italy, haven't we? And here's the little loggia on top of the Palazzo Vecchio in Florence, which is normally, unfortunately, is closed, but occasionally you're allowed to go out there, and it's a rather wonderful spot up on the corner of the Palazzo Vecchio. And then here, near it, is the wonderful little room of Eleonora of Toledo, who was married to one of the Grand Dukes. And this fantastic frieze with babies playing with the letters of her name. I love details like that. And I love painted rooms. We'll look at a lot of those. And then here's a floor in there with Medici diamond rings, which were one of the emblems of the family, and their motto, Semper, always, and all executed in terracotta. And then this instead is a fantastic thing made, I think, maybe for Diane de Poitiers, the mistress of Henri IV of France. And I'll probably get all the names and the relationships wrong. But anyway, I'll try and look them up properly before I do the actual tours. But that's also in Florence, but in Palazzo Pitti, in the Museo degli Argenti, which is one of the most fantastic museums of treasure. And here also in Palazzo Pitti, that's Napoleon's bathroom, put in for him. I have a feeling he never got there to use it, but it's a rather fantastic Empire interior. And then also in Italy, we might go to Mantua in English, and there, a long time ago, this must be 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I found this fantastic farm outside the city with these incredible farm buildings, which are now just used as barns, and whether they were originally meant as farm buildings, I don't know. And a book I read said that they were designed by Giulio Romano. In fact, I don't think they were. I think they were one of his followers. But they're rather fantastic with the tractors, aren't they? And then in the city, that's Giulio Romano's own house, which is completely wonderful. I never managed to get in. Wouldn't it be marvellous to go in there? But we will go inside Palazzo Te and the Palazzo Ducale and all the other fantastic monuments in Mantua. And then we might go to Rimini, further over on the Adriatic coast, below Venice, and the incredible Tempio Malatestiano, built for one of the great sort of condottieri, military sort of, soldiers for hire in Renaissance Italy, and the Prince of Rimini and Pesaro. And he offended the Pope, and so he was excommunicated. And this vast temple that he was building to the glory of his family and of himself and his mistress, Isotta Deliatti, and her emblem, I think, was the elephant. And so here there's a couple of black marble elephants supporting a great sort of towering sculpture. But anyway, we'll look at that in detail. It's a fantastic building. And then here we're in Bologna, in the Archiginnasio, the beautiful old university in Bologna, and the anatomy theatre in the anatomy school with these incredible flayed figures, life-size figures carved in wood. Absolutely beautiful things. And then on the road, again, Umbria and the Marche, and these are miniature castles designed by a fantastic Renaissance polymath called Francesco di Giorgio Martini, who was a military architect as well as a sculptor and a painter and a regular architect. And he designed these miniature castles, very, very efficient, very small number of soldiers needed to defend them, but they make these fantastic geometric shapes, and they're dotted all around that territory, and built for this man, Federico da Montefeltro, who was the Duke of Urbino. Here he is with his rather ill-fated son, Guidobaldo, and he's just the most fascinating character, and built a series of extraordinary houses, and here's the great one that survives, which is the Ducal Palace in Urbino, which I think is the most perfect palace in the world, really, and so we'll look at that in a bit of detail, because I just love it. Here's the facade of it facing the valley outside, with these twin towers containing spiral stairs linking all of the different bits of his apartments together, and these wonderful balconies between them, one of which leads off of his studiolo, his small room, where he would entertain the most prestigious visitors, and the whole thing is covered in this wonderful wood marquetry, these trompe-l'oeil pictorial panels made with different kinds of wood and different colours of wood, and showing things like his armour, which he's taken off and put away in a cupboard because he's no longer fighting, in theory at least. And then on the left, a portrait of him. And there's actually a door from this room, a secret door hidden in the panelling, which leads to the balcony outside. And I was very lucky one time, managed to get them to open the door, which was tremendously exciting. And there I am, looking tremendously excited on the balcony. A very, very happy moment, taken in fact by my darling Martina, which is probably why I'm looking so happy, I suppose. And then we could cross the Atlantic and go to America and more classical architecture, but this time by Thomas Jefferson and his collaborators for the University of Virginia, his academical village, which is one of the most fantastic architectural compositions anywhere, I think, and really a diagram of an ideal world, which we're not really living in right now, are we? But perhaps one day. But I love that place, and also his house, Monticello, fantastic piece of architecture also. And more American houses. Here's Frederick Church, the great landscape painter. His house at Olana in upstate New York. And it's a marvelous place, fascinating. Here one of the interiors. And then a more modern house built in 1948 by Philip Johnson for Dominique de Menil in Houston, a very, very basic, simple house, very modern, which she then had decorated by her couturier, Edward James, which is a rather fascinating idea, to not be able at all to find a decorator who'd be able to decorate your house, and so you get your dressmaker to do it instead. And they came up together with the most fantastic ideas, like this dressing corridors. This is a passage leading, connecting, I think, her children's bedrooms to her bedroom, and various bathrooms and things. But she made it into a sort of dressing room by having folding doors of mirror and then other ones of velvet, so that she could use it to check out her outfit before entertaining people. And then here's a fantastic house in France, Malmaison, a small country house built for the first consul, Napoleon, and his wife Josephine born there. And then, of course, once he divorced her and left her in the house, and so she then redecorated slightly. But it is one of the most fantastic, stylish houses anywhere. Here's the Pompeian dining room and the library, and we'll look at all the details of this house and how it works and how ingenious it is. And then here's another of his interiors, and this one completely planned by poor Josephine while they were married, but she never got to use the house at all. And the most beautiful bathroom that we'll see when we look at it. And none of that could she use because she'd been kicked out, and Napoleon instead married Mary Louise of Austria and brought her here for the little, very brief honeymoon, which is quite a funny story. But this is Napoleon's library in that Palace of Compiègne. I'm sorry, I didn't say Compiègne. And there's one of the jib doors in the library. You can see how incredibly beautifully it's made. Anyway, there we are. That's the sort of thing we'll be looking at. And I hope you'll join me on my tour. Come with me. I'm an unreliable guide, but I hope I'll be able to convey some of my enthusiasm for all of these places and help you to enjoy them too. Join me.